Welcome, everybody. Hello and welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. My name is Renee Miller. I'm the program manager for the OBI, and welcome to this educational program on retaining and recruiting top talent in this post-COVID world we're all living in. Very timely topic. Before we begin, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. OBI and Otrati would like to acknowledge the land we are all on, wherever we may be. Otrati conducts business throughout Portland and beyond, and is making an effort to acknowledge the history of the area and work towards decolonization of the bioscience industry. Portland rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapoya, Malala, and many other tribes who have made their homes along the Columbia River. So please join us in acknowledging the land we are all on throughout Oregon and beyond. And to learn more about Portland's native, diverse, and vibrant community, please read Leading with Tradition, a document created by the Portland Indian Leaders Roundtable. And I will put a link to it in the chat box in just a second. So before we get started, we have three wonderful speakers today. I am going to go ahead and give a brief bio for each of them. Ruba Asmussen started RTA Consulting to solve an unmet need out there for synthetic biology and biomanufacturing startups who are looking to grow. She is an experienced recruiting and business leader for the life science and technology industries. Ruba holds a bachelor's degree in molecular and cellular biology from UC Berkeley. She's a mom of two, a tribute band rock guitarist, and a total hiring nerd. Next, we have Steve Waterman. He has 17 years of technical and non-technical recruiting experience across a variety of industries, including manufacturing, healthcare, natural resources, and aerospace. His favorite part of recruiting is helping to advance the careers of the candidates that he helps hire and seeing the positive impact they have on the companies they join. In his free time, you'll find Steve enjoying the Pacific Northwest outdoors, Portland and Vancouver area restaurant and microbrewery scene, and going to timber games. Helen Sesterich's passion for relationship building has led her to a career of over 10 years in customer service and human resources. Gaining a variety of HR programs experience with Genentech's contingent workforce, Helen comes to RTA fueled by the satisfaction of helping others, whether a new hire wanting to know next steps, a manager needing guidance on dealing with a sticky situation, or collaborating with colleagues on a project to improve the employee's experience. Driven by her ambition to grow and being an even more valuable resource, Helen went back to school, graduated with an MBA with a concentration in HR. On her days off, you can find Helen hanging out with her loved ones and making creative Instagram reels, encouraging others to be their own curator of positive experiences. So welcome to these three knowledgeable presenters today. And if you have questions for our speakers during their presentation, please type them in the chat and we'll do Q&A at the end. And as always, please keep your microphones on mute so that we don't have any disruptions during the presentation, which looks to be really, really great. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Ruba to go ahead and get us started today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Renee, and thanks OBI and Portland State for having RTA Consulting today. And thanks for everyone for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. So hopefully we'll give you, some information and new perspectives on, this crazy post-COVID world that we are entering, which I'm excited about. Anyhow, so great. Let's go ahead and dive in. So Renee, thanks for the beautiful introduction. So it's me, Ruba Asmussen, and my colleagues Helen Sesterich and Steve Waterman. So today we're going to be going over, I'm going to give kind of a high-level view on, some things related to the workforce and maybe how to start thinking about, jobs and our approach to hybrid work. Helen is going to provide some more tangible, kind of specific, actionable things that employers can take. And Steve is going to take that and run with it and provide some recruiting angles. And then we're going to tie it all together, and there will be plenty of time for questions at the end. So here we go. So one of the things that I really wanted to emphasize, so people and their potential. So this, again, this is coming from the point of view of an employer. So people and their potential are your greatest asset. At least that's what we believe, being HR professionals. One of the things to keep in mind, these are not typical assets. This is not your 401k account. This is not your mutual bonds. These assets have all kinds of different needs. You know, if you leave them alone too long, they're going to get lonely. You know, you can't really say that about bank accounts and such, maybe mine, but yeah, so these are typical assets, and we need to do things to protect and nurture these assets so that we can get the most potential out of them to advance, you know, whatever it is or whatever mission our companies are doing. So that's where HR comes in. So HR helps companies get the most out of their people, right? And you can see the employee life cycle here on the right. So, you know, attracting, recruiting, onboarding, developing employees, retaining and engaging them, and separating. Wanted to point out that RTA, this is our specialty, and this is what we do for companies. So we help companies attract and recruit talent. We serve as basically an in-house recruiting team and talent partner for the biotech clients we work with. Wanted to show you guys, this is a snapshot from just a few months ago. This was the RTA team. This is our entire team, just 6 people. We are 12 now. So we have doubled in just a few months. We have been growing organically with demand on the market. This is all to say that there is a big demand for talent out there, and yeah, and companies have been coming to us needing a lot of help, you know, getting these high demand professionals. So anyhow, wanted to frame, kind of tee it up with a framework, right? So perhaps one way to think about worker types, right? Knowledge work versus physical work. So a major difference between these two work types is knowledge work is information-based and physical work is physical or materials-based, as you can see. So big differences. The knowledge work is all mental in nature, and others can't see your work, right? And it's also very portable. So some examples, you know, I'm in recruiting. It's a knowledge-based profession. I mean, I might be shampooing my hair, my curls in the morning, and you know, thinking about work, or how do I solve this problem? Or, you know, I might be laying in bed late at night, which happens a lot. You know, trying to think about, you know, some challenges, right? You can't see that I'm working, but I'm working, right? And I think a lot of you, you know, may work in professions that have parallels there. Whereas, you know, the more materials-based types of work is visible to others. It's manual in nature and does need a physical environment, whether it's tools, equipment, stuff that needs to be moved around, right? Now, this is where we enter into the life sciences, which is really unique. Because we have roles that are knowledge-based, we have roles that are physical-based, and we have everything in between, right? So I have a continuum here. From the left, software engineering, corporate functions, then you get more into lab-based scientists where, you know, they're doing a lot of knowledge work, but there's a big physical work component, and so on and so forth. And if you go back up to all the human needs, the diagram above that, it's just a reminder that the different types of combinations or I guess phenotype of work, whether it's knowledge-based, physical-based, or both, you know, these assets, these humans still have needs that need to be nurtured, right? And these needs may differ depending on the nature of their work, right? So So for example, physiological, if we're talking about somebody, and the topic of the day is, okay, home-based or office-based, like where are we going to be working in the future? Physiological needs, right? So home-based might look something like, someone needs ergonomic assessments, or maybe we're going to repurpose commute hours to other things. Maybe we give those people a stipend for their home office or meal deliveries, right? Whereas in an office, maybe we redesign comfortable settings. We have wellness rooms and gyms so that they, folks can kind of find balance there. A commuter stipend, because the home-based people don't have to commute. Cater lunches, or this is kind of a crazy idea, a stipend for home cleaning. I'm a work from home person. Not gonna lie, sometimes in between meetings, I'll clean my house, right? Or I'll get some stuff done around the home where, maybe someone who works in the office doesn't have that luxury. So how do we support them? I don't know, it was just a crazy idea I threw out there while I was putting this presentation together. But just to give you a sense of, how can we think about these things, right? There's another example, love and belonging. So home-based folks might get more family time, whereas maybe office-based folks might bring their kid to work, right? And so on and so forth. You can have activity groups, you can send kind notes to people, whether it's in the mail or leaving notes on a desk, scheduling team social time. Anyhow, so on and so forth. You guys can look at all the different needs that humans have and, think about how we might play to these needs in different environments. Okay, so not just the work type, but also individuals have their own specific situations. So you can see two gentlemen pictured here. First one's in an office, the second one's working from home. They're both distracted, right? And this is real. And this speaks to just individual needs. A really cool concept, and this is an amazing book that I love and recommend to everyone I can, is Deep Work. Deep Work speaks specifically to knowledge workers, where to really get the maximum output, it's important for knowledge workers to spend time going deep on their topics, right? And not being distracted by things like emails, coworkers, unfortunately, right? Or things that are considered shallow work in this book's framework. So this book also says that we can only really do truly 4 hours of deep work a day. But if we can maximize that and let our knowledge workers achieve that, we can really maximize their knowledge work. So anyway, so maybe that's something we consider when we design our work arrangements. So, all right. So there was a lot of advocacy for working from home, but working in person does have advantages. There's no doubt about that, right? There's no replacement for in-person human interaction, or no true equivalent replacement, right? But the key here moving forward is knowing, COVID has really changed the landscape out there, and we're going to talk more about that. But there is no longer a one-size-fits-all approach. And so companies need to, I'm going to emphasize this, it's essential for a company to think about how are they going to cater to the different workers, their needs, and to keep them engaged and productive post-COVID. So I'm going to hand it off to Helen. She's going to talk to us about the hybrid work model.
Yes, thank you so much, Ruba, for that. So the question now is, how can we create the right setup that maximizes the workforce potential? So let's go ahead and start with the basics. A hybrid model, go ahead, next slide, Ruba, sorry. A hybrid model allows some work to be done remotely while other work is done on site. That's literally all a hybrid model stands for. Next slide. And as you can see, she was happy in that last one because she has a hybrid model she's working with. And as we were doing our research, we were coming across these articles that had these headlines that made you very aware that the employee workforce has been talking about what the workforce model will look like post-COVID. And it looks like there is no turning back now. This is it. We're in it. We have to figure out what works for us. Next slide. So we're in life sciences, which means we like data. So we want to see, what does the data show that the people are wanting? Blind conducted a survey where they asked 3,000 employees, would you like a 30,000 raise, or would you like to work permanently remote? On average, 81% said that they would rather work remotely. Now, granted, this was with big tech companies, but how many of us have ever heard of somebody turning down $30,000 as a raise? Like, that's kind of crazy to me. And then our next one, CNET posted, was a study that the Harvard Business conducted. They asked 1,500 people, how do you feel about returning to the office? 81% of the employees that were currently already working remotely wanted to stay remote, or they were interested in a hybrid model. 27% wanted to work indefinitely remote. So these are some high numbers as far as percentages wise. And then our last study that we're going to look at was with Microsoft. They partnered with the Work Trend Index, and they surveyed 30,000 people, from employees all the way up to upper management, and asked them the same thing. How do we feel about returning to work? 70% want flexible options. 66% of companies are already redesigning their physical spaces for a hybrid model. So this is definitely happening. People are definitely reacting to this. So it's looking like a hybrid model is where we're going, or where the workforce is going to take us. Next slide, Ruba. So then traditionally, how has the office served us? Well, both employer and employees believe that the office serves as a place for collaboration and a meeting space. Employers also believe that the office serves to enable the company's culture, as well as increasing the employee production, versus employees who believe that the office also serves as a space for being able to train, develop their career, as well as accessing their equipment and documents. Now, what we find kind of ironic, if you want to hit next, Ruba, is that the employers thought that an office related to productivity, and employees did not. So is this outdated thinking? Is this something that applies to everyone? Just some questions. Now, let's say we're ready to implement a hybrid model. How do we maximize our workforce? Well, we got to collect the data. We should figure out what work can be done remotely versus what work can be done on site. For example, we have our research associates. Usually they are in the lab. However, we have research associates that also are on interview panels that maybe are just doing research for that day. So when they have work like that, can we have them work remotely? Is that a possibility? So how do we collect this data? Well, we get our employees' feedback. We ask questions. We also can go back to our job descriptions and characterize the work that's required. So back to what Ruba was stating earlier, what's knowledge-based work and what's physical-based work, or whatever framework you have for your company, what works best for you and your employees. Then we want to listen to our employees. Maybe we don't need a hybrid model. Maybe everybody's fine with what's working now, but we do want to give them our ear. We want to get their buy-in because we want to make sure the people that we are supporting feel supported. And then lastly, once you've collected the data, you've listened to your employees, you want to communicate your plan. And transparency is key. I cannot stress that enough. We all want to feel heard, and we also don't like to be in the dark. So if a hybrid model maybe doesn't work, or if it does work, being transparent with your team and letting them know your thought process with this, why this works, what we're going to do, will make them feel more reassured about next steps. All right, now maybe we have the hybrid model. We've listened to our employees. We may come across some situations where equity becomes an issue. Here are some ideas that we think might help with that. First, maintain an open mind and be flexible. That's what this post-COVID world has taught us. We are used to being traditional in how work is done, usually in a building. The post-COVID world has required us to look at how we do work differently and be flexible with that. So it may be useful to keep in mind that some workers are more productive when they're at home versus in the office because they're more focused. Maybe they have less distractions, but you as an employer, just being open to the idea of remote work will say 1,000 words to your employees and really keep them. Then we want to establish some virtual hybrid meeting etiquette. Find those meetings that make sense to create that small talk. How was the weekend? What do we have for breakfast? Are the kids doing okay? Did you get a new pet? We want to recreate that virtual water cooler feel that we have, that we miss the most in person. So that way we feel connected again. It doesn't feel like it's just all business. Another idea with virtual meeting etiquette is when we have meetings, those workers that are on site, they dial into those meetings as well. So you don't have people that look like little baby ants on your screen, or those people that you can't hear because they're sitting very far from the conference room mic. Make everybody dial in so we all see each other on our nice little screens, and we still feel like we're having a meeting as a team. And then if we go ahead and move on to inclusive teaching and practicing inclusive behaviors, which I love, love, love this so much, we want to eliminate that feeling of haves and have-nots. So there's like a conception, which isn't totally wrong, that when you're in the office, you have more access to your managers, because when you're on your way to get something to eat, maybe a drink, you can just pull them aside. So we suggest setting aside your own personal office hours for your remote workers to grab you for a quick 15 minutes. But you want to make sure you're giving those workers that don't see you the same accessibility as the workers that do see you. So that way we're making them feel included. They don't feel like they're missing out on anything. Having a solid intranet. So an intranet is just a hub for information, a centralized location where all your employees can go to figure out what is what, best practices, tips and tricks, your learning platform, how do I submit an expense? If you have it in an intranet, that eliminates your team having to come to you with these questions, and they have a centralized place. They know where they can go. They got their questions. And if they come to you, it's because they couldn't find it. And then we also want to make sure that we are establishing inclusive communication norms. So virtual life there's this thing where, well, what if we can't get in touch with somebody? Well, make sure you're using software that makes sense for your group. Is it Google? Maybe Slack, Microsoft Teams, but making sure that we have a established communication norm so that we know how to communicate. We know where to look for information. We know where to document. Having these practices in place will become very, very important and will definitely help people feel like nothing's changed, nothing's different. It doesn't matter if I'm home, it doesn't matter if I'm in the office, we have the same experience. Next slide, Ms. Ruba. All right, so maybe we're still not sure. We're like, I don't know, Helen, it sounds good, but you need to sell me a little bit more. I got you, I'm here for that. So how can a hybrid model add to your company? Well, it expands your talent pool. You're not looking in just your backyard. You can look at the next city, the next county. If you're feeling brave, the next state. You get a whole different variety of people by you simply having some kind of flexibility with where the work can be done. You also, I did want to also say this. There's a company called Desk Pass. They literally were created for virtual work. And they have found that millennials value flexibility and freedom around where and when they work versus a high salary, which means that you can go and poach those millennials for the simple fact that you have a hybrid model. Love it. And then diversity. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Mom Project, but they are a company that literally was created to help working moms find jobs that foster work-life balance. So with this hybrid model, you get to get those moms that are new moms, but aren't ready to leave their babies. You also get to get those employees who maybe don't have reliable transportation. Maybe they live with their parents still and they don't have their own transportation. So they can't come to work 5 days, but they can make 2 days work if that's all you need. So you get a diverse pool of talent. Not only do you expand your talent pool, you also enhance your company's culture. 95% of employers say remote work has a high impact on employee retention. Having a hybrid model literally expands the options that you have to enhance your company culture. We can have virtual happy hours where we now can include those moms who maybe couldn't go to a happy hour before because they had to pick up their kids, they had to make lunch. Or we can have a paint night where not only are we doing it with the team, but our team's family can maybe join virtually with that. So you really get to build communities when you have a hybrid model. So I love hybrid models with company culture, if you can't tell. And then lastly, decreasing our overhead costs. So if we're not paying for a building, we're not paying for water, you can reinvest that money into your team, into your company. So maybe we need better materials now. We can afford better equipment. Maybe we reinvest in our software. So we get better software so it's easier for us to communicate, but you get to reinvest back into your company. Who doesn't want to do that, right? Like, let's go for it. And then lastly, Ruba, you can go ahead and switch sides. Before I pass the baton over to Steve, we think Tim said it pretty well. Businesses that want to attract and retain the talent they need to move forward must understand the top priorities of their future workforce. They must embrace new, flexible work models, and cultivate a workforce that can design their own careers. Also, RTA is pretty cool. He said it, not us. And with that, I will go ahead and toss it over to Steve, who will talk about recruiting in this post-COVID world.
Thanks a lot, Helen. That was a great take on the world of hybrid work and its impact on employee retention. Of course, for many of you watching today, especially if your company is growing at a rapid pace and in hiring mode, the recruiting part of the equation might even be more important for you right now. So what I'm going to talk about is how to optimize your recruiting approach for this unique post-COVID work from home moment that we're in. We're going to cover a few big picture strategy ideas, and then we're going to look at some best-in-class samples of companies who are how they're promoting their various work from home options. But I first want to start with what has not changed in recruiting. And this is despite all the coverage of work from home and the fact that we all know it is in some ways dramatically changing the workplace. The fact is most of the traditional candidate motivations out there have stayed pretty much the same as they were pre-COVID. Candidates have always been and are still looking for career advancement opportunities, great companies to work for, awesome teams to be a part of, as well as better compensation, benefits, and perks, and many other things that, of course, vary a bit from person to person. So it's important to keep those in mind, as we don't want to lose sight of what will remain important candidate motivations. However, let's face it, being able to work from home either partially or entirely is really a giant new wrinkle which has altered the traditional landscape of recruiting. Simply put, candidates are thinking a little differently now, and who can blame them? Because once you've tried work from home, the majority of people are naturally going to have a lot or at least some interest in that moving forward. In fact, to illustrate what we're seeing these days, I want to show you two emails that I've received just in the last couple of weeks as I was building this slide deck from local biotech candidates. The first sample here is from a biotech industry PhD in Portland, and it was a response to my recruit email to them on LinkedIn. They basically said, thanks for the email. I'm currently looking for a work from home opportunity and would love to talk if you are aware of such opportunities. Now, from my perspective, before COVID, we saw a few of these responses on occasion, but obviously post-COVID, this type of email is much more common. Next slide. My second sample here was a recent response via LinkedIn from a local candidate who's seeking a project manager role within life sciences. And they said, I've been keeping my eyes open for hybrid or 100% work from home opportunities since the company is pushing to get everyone back in the office full time, which none of us want. So I'd say before COVID, I didn't see too many responses quite like that or requesting hybrid work. Whereas I think getting this now is par for the course, and it's not going to be a surprise to anybody in recruiting. But of course, those are just two examples. But I do think they're very, although those are two examples, I think they're very indicative of what many of your potential top candidates across most of your different job categories are probably thinking right now. People are on the lookout for much better or maybe even just slightly better work from home possibilities. And they're clearly open to talking with you about roles that match this. I'd also say that an extremely important takeaway here is that not all candidates are going to bring this up, on an email or a call. Some are just going to be thinking it, perhaps hoping that you bring it up at some point, either you, the recruiter, or you, the hiring manager at a business. And in many cases, you won't necessarily bring it up. So what I'm seeing probably more often is candidates are simply waiting for the right moment in the interview process where they can ask you about your work from home options. Next slide. So given the reality that more people are looking for work from home options, combined with the fact that many people are finally ready to make career moves that they've perhaps delayed during the pandemic, I really believe we're walking into one of the best and most unique recruiting environments that we're ever going to see. And of course, your chance for recruiting success will be greatly enhanced if you can take advantage of the work from home options that candidates are clamoring to hear about right now. So let's talk about some big picture recruiting strategy as to how to do that. The approach that I'm recommending is a simple two-part recruiting strategy you can use with work from home options in mind. Of course, you can use this same strategy for non-work from home scenarios as well, but today I'm focusing entirely through a work from home lens. Part one is fully understanding your best and most compelling work from home, hybrid, remote, whatever you want to call it, recruiting angles for every role that you have. For example, what roles do you have where you can truly offer a superior work from home option that you know is probably better than the competition? For example, maybe this would be for a software, data, or bioinformatics engineer that can work remotely anywhere in the United States. And just maybe that engineer gets the amazing perk of getting to visit the office here in Portland a few times a year. Trust me, that remote option with free trips to the Pacific Northwest is probably going to be somebody's dream job out there. Another angle to think of here is where you essentially offer the same or similar work from home options as your competition. Maybe an example of this, I guess, would be for a research position or a scientist role where the lab work is 80% of the job, but you're now open to them doing some or all of their non-lab work from home. While this might be about the same as the other companies are doing right now, I'm not totally sure, but based on what I've seen, I can say there aren't too many companies out there that are marketing this particular angle. Next slide. So that leads me to part two of this recruiting strategy, which is marketing, amplifying, promoting your angles to the maximum degree possible. And my recommendation is try to do it throughout many of the key touch points in the candidate journey through the hiring process. That journey typically starts for most people from the minute they see a job posting or they get a recruit email from someone at your company, all the way through the various steps of the interview process. The key takeaway here is to amplify what you do offer. Even if it doesn't seem like much, I can assure you that most of your competition likely isn't mentioning these angles at all, because that small edge that you've carved out by thinking through this, when marketing in an effective, compelling way, can often be a huge edge in recruiting. And if you're not doing this, some other recruiter or hiring manager or even the company CEO of a local biotech company who's your competitor is going to be doing this. And given how tough it is to find biotech talent just in general, this will give them a nice advantage over you. Next slide. So once you know your angles and you're ready to market them, here's a quick list of 5 of the primary places where we can market our work from home options when we have those open positions. The first is highlighting your work from home options on job postings, and I'll give you a few examples of this in a minute. The second is amplifying work from home on your company's LinkedIn posts, and we're going to look at one really great example of this in a second as well. Next would be adding your work from home options to your recruit emails or your in-mails if you use LinkedIn to prospective candidates. Adding this can be easy to forget sometimes, but if you include it, it will likely increase your response rate from prospects. Fourth is encouraging your current team to do the marketing for you in the form of employee referrals. Your current employees, quite frankly, should be able to explain your work from home options as well as anyone. And together, all of them together have tons of former colleagues, classmates, and friends, some of whom could be working at companies with no work from home options, kind of like that email I showed you earlier. And then fifth on this list, I think is really often overlooked, even by a lot of recruiters, but it usually has really great recruiting ROI. And that's simply going back to former candidates and applicants who interviewed with you, a year or 2 or 3 years ago, but were perhaps runners up in the process. Maybe they didn't have enough experience at the time, or they weren't local, or whatever the case may be. I'd highly recommend now going back and repitching your newest open positions to them with work from home in mind. Along these same lines would be finding your boomerangs. And for those of you that haven't heard the term boomerangs, they're former employees of your company who left at some point in the past for greener pastures, but who might now be willing to return. Your new work from home options could possibly be the hook that entices them to return. So now let's look at a few best-in-class examples. We're going to focus on job postings and LinkedIn posts, but you can use these themes throughout the other elements of your recruiting that you do. These particular companies, let's see, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. There we go, thank you. So this first sample LinkedIn job posting is from a biotech company on the East Coast. And what they do is very simple, but it's not used as much as it should be. And that's they're adding the word remote to the actual job posting title. Now, note you could use the word hybrid or some other variation of work from home there as well. But to fully appreciate this, it helps if you imagine a candidate scrolling through dozens, if not hundreds of job postings on their phone or their computer, and having remote in the actual title really is going to guarantee you more clicks on that job. And a quick side note on this, there was a LinkedIn report that just came out a week or 2 ago that talked about remote positions are represented in only 9% of LinkedIn's paid job ads last in May, but they attracted 20% of all job posting views and 24% of applicants. So the second sample, next slide. The second sample here is a job posting for a biotech company in the Bay Area. And what they do is they add a remote hybrid mention within the posting text. But notice in this case, it is literally the very top of the posting, which for most of us in recruiting, that would be fairly unusual placement. But what I gleaned from this is they clearly want this to be seen. They think they probably have an edge in their competitors, and they don't want any candidates to miss it within the text. Next slide. This third sample job posting adds a hybrid remote section down within the posting text itself, and it adds a work from home percentage, which I'm not seeing a lot of yet. And quite frankly, I think companies at this point are being pretty vague on this subject, whether it's 50-50, whether it's 80-20, whether it's 75-25. So in this case, with this particular posting, I highly suspect that the candidates who see it are really going to like this specific percentage approach because they're not seeing it in other places. Next slide. And this last example is a LinkedIn post from Instacart, which of course is not in life sciences and not in Portland. But I want you to see what they've done because I think they're taking this recruiting strategy we've discussed today to a fairly advanced level. In this particular post, they're sending quite a message to the world about how they have evolved with the future of work. And then on the bottom of the post, they've of course added a link to learn more. I think most people who read this are probably thinking, yeah, tell me more, and they're going to click this link. So when you click the link, it takes you to, next slide, what I think is a really brilliantly done single web page on Instacart's career site, which of course shows a lady happily working from home, and it has a tagline that essentially sums up what we've talked about today and it sums up recruiting and retention in this new post-COVID world. As the future of work evolves, so does where we work. Then you scroll down the page, next slide, and it highlights their 3 options, which are office, flex, and remote. Next slide. And then it leads to additional text. I won't read through it, but it does a really nice job outlining a pretty nuanced approach to work from home. It explains some of the unique elements that are part of their offerings, including what time zones you need to be in. They're basically giving people more detail here than anyone else does, at least anything I've seen, and I look at a lot of job postings, and I really think candidates are going to love this approach. And I think we're going to see more of this in the future. And then last slide. So finally, the page ends with see open roles. That takes candidates straight to the open positions, which is where you want them to go. So I realize that most of you watching today are with companies that are different size and industry than, say, Instacart. So I know you can't all do a web page on your work from home options. However, I think their approach in understanding their talent pool, marketing the work from home options that they can offer should really be very instructive to us as we all now work to understand and market our own unique positions that we're working on, whatever those might be, not only right now, but as we come out of the pandemic and as we grow the region's biotech industry into the future. So with that, I'm going to turn back over to Ruba for some closing comments.
Thanks, Steve. Always insightful. So really appreciate all of that. So in conclusion, and to wrap it all up, so hybrid working models are being widely adopted, and they offer your company a competitive advantage for talent. While you're coming up with your working model, continually do what makes sense for your company and your worker population. So this is a living, breathing, continuous conversation. And lastly, as Steve highlighted, once you got it, shout it out from the rooftops. Let people know. So, all right, well, good. We wanted to thank you guys and thank OBI and Portland State Business Accelerator for having us. If you want more information on what we do, we have a website, and we're also going to circulate some additional information, how to connect with us on LinkedIn, and these slides afterwards. So I'll hand it over to Renee for any closing thoughts.
Great, thank you. Gosh, this was really, really wonderful presentation. So many helpful ideas and specific strategies for how to recruit and retain employees and meet everyone's needs. And I loved your humor. I loved your slide deck. Really, really great information. So for those of you attending, some of you did send in questions in advance, and the ones who are on the call now, if you have questions, let's go to those ones first. So just go ahead and put those into the chat or raise your hand, and Christelle's going to help from Portland State Business Accelerator. She's going to help moderate the question and answer period right now. So don't be shy, raise your hand or put it in the chat. And we'll also get to some of the questions people asked when they registered. I don't see any yet. Should we go to some of the questions from before? Let's do that first. And then, okay, so one question that somebody asked when they registered for this Lunch and Learn asked HR best practices for small businesses. You know, maybe they don't have an HR department. What activities are recommended to outsource? Any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. If you remember, you may remember the slide I showed where it showed the employee life cycle, right? Where it's attract, recruit, and then you onboard people, and then you develop them, and then keep them engaged and separate. Now, oftentimes with small companies, you know, it might just be, you know, a couple people or the senior leadership that are doing all that work, right? And that's typical, right? There might not be enough of that work to really justify a person. However, there may be times where some of that work just becomes a really heavy lift. Where we come in, for example, is when companies are really ramping up the hiring, and it's no longer feasible for somebody in-house to handle that. And what I tell people is, you'll know it, you'll feel the pain. and that also goes with any other parts of your employee life cycle. If your employees are asking for more learning and development, or maybe they're not as engaged as you want them to, want them to be. That may be an opportunity to bring in, you know, an external HR professional to help you out with some of that stuff that becomes a heavy lift. So kind of a vague, this is when, but that I would say you will feel it. And that's probably a good signal.
Thank you, Ruba. We had one question come into the chat. If a candidate is applying for a remote position, say from Hawaii, but the company is in Vancouver, Washington, what resources are available regarding tax implications for both the employer and the employee?
We cannot legally give tax advice. I'm just going to throw it out there. First of all, so what resources are available? I think it's going to differ. And I'm saying this because my company RTA, we have employees in different states, and we also work with companies in different states. So I've personally dealt with this. What I have found is there's a lot of information out there. You have to go to the state websites. I think that's typically where you're going to find it. There's also a lot of information online with people who've experienced this before. And yeah, again, a vague answer, but each state has its own thing. And then you have to see how the states kind of are compatible with each other. So yeah, I would say the state websites are a good first place to go. The second place to go is if it gets real complicated, you may want to hire, a tax professional to maybe give you some advice there.
Great, thank you.
If I could add one just quick angle to that, in researching some of the job postings that we were looking at for this, I did notice that there were some postings that specifically excluded certain states from remote work. And I forget the company, but one that caught my eye was, I think you could work in every state except Colorado. So I'm not sure what the meaning behind that was, but perhaps companies will get better as remote becomes more prevalent, they'll get better at posting the certain jurisdictions that you can't be living in to work remote with us. So thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, an example comes to mind where a really great, talented colleague of mine was, moved to Nevada. And the company she was working for said, hey, we can have remote, but we can't have Nevada, because there was some kind of, I don't know, exposure, or, it was a large company. It was something they were not comfortable with or set up for. And that's why that person was looking, because they ended up taking a job that wasn't remote, that was local and not that exciting. And so I was able to, come on over here, girl, you can work remotely, and we're set up for Nevada. So that turned out to be a really great win for us.
Good example.
Yeah.
Good example. Okay, so another question somebody asked is, and this isn't really regarding recruiting, but you have grown your team a lot in the past year. What are your favorite practices for team building? Any thoughts there?
Oh, I'm going to turn that over to Helen. Helen's been like, I don't know, our internal spirit animal, I guess.
Yeah. What I've noticed the best with team building is doing something that the majority of the team can do. So I think the beautiful part about this hybrid world that we're moving into is that you can do so much more with everybody without having to go to a space. And the world notices that. So there are companies that are building out things for team building that are explicit to virtual life, or you not being in the same area. So I highly encourage I encourage happy hours. Even if you don't drink, you can drink water, but happy hours are a very good way to team build in a non-super formal environment. You can do community exercises. Like if everybody logs how many miles they walked that day, at the end of the quarter, whoever walked the most miles gets something. But I think just being mindful of who your team is. You probably know what they like. Most of us have a lot in common, the things that we like to do. So I encourage, ask your team, ask what they like to do. What is fun to them? Putting out surveys every quarter. Are you a nature person? Are you a movie person? Are you a talker like me, where you could just talk all day and that makes you happy? But finding what works best for your team as a whole will help build your team. And as a small team like RTA, what I do is I communicate a lot. So have a good day, good job team, we got this. We have a banana dance channel on our Slack channel that really it makes us feel like we're all in this together, because that's where we celebrate our wins. And you don't think that's team building, but it really is in the grand scheme of things, because we're all celebrating our wins together. And it's not like, oh, Ruba got this person. Oh, Steve got this person. It's like, yeah, Steve got it. But all of us are like, yeah, Steve, we got it. So doing things that even if only one person did it, making everybody feel a part of that success really makes you feel inclusive. And then when you have maybe some failures or you have those rough days, you know your team is there for you. So you can have that day where you just bust out crying, or maybe you throw some explicitives out there because you just have to get it out your system, but you've built a team that trusts that this is a safe space. So I would start with knowing your team. And if it's a big team, send out surveys. Surveys are great. Google has great surveys that make it very, very easy. They're called Google Forms. SurveyMonkey is super easy to use as well. So I would say if you don't know your team, find out about your team, learn your team, and figure out what we can do that is also cost effective, because we have parents now. COVID has made some of us, we're impacted personally by COVID. So we have medical expenses that we have to deal with. So trying to be cognizant of life as well. We don't want to do anything that takes people too far from their families, too long from their families, something that causes them to focus too much, do things that also they can include. So I highly encourage paint nights. We actually did scavenger hunts at my last job where someone came up with things that you have to go find. So you have to go find something green, and it can't be food. You can get the family involved with that, but it's a team exercise. So know your team and then figure out what works best with that. Did that answer the question? I ramble a lot.
And that was a very good answer. Awesome. Yeah, I'll throw in, my husband works for Salesforce, and his boss arranged for a wine and cheese night with like this like cheese connoisseur, and everyone got the cheese and wine delivered, and oh my gosh, that was like literally the most fun like online event I've had, and I just thought it was so great. I'm going to bring it to our team as well. But
I can't wait. And actually, with that point, when Ruba put that out there, we all had like a cheese geek out moment, and we found out everybody likes cheese on our team. Like, we really go hard for cheese. So even small things like that, like Ruba just being open to us as our CEO and creating that space for us to be human, goes a long way that I don't even think as upper management we really think about. Just, we're all human resources, we put the human in it. So just remember your team's human. We all go through things, we all have stuff that happens, so we bleed red.
And use the dancing banana emoji all the time.
Yes.
If you have Slack, I mean, that if that doesn't make you smile, then I don't know what will. So anyways.
Do dancing bananas?
With dancing bananas, yep.
Helen, we had actually a follow-up question come into the chat for you. From an equity standpoint, have you or your colleagues used the app textio.com for writing equitable job descriptions? And do you have any resources for how to write equitable job descriptions?
Ruba raised her hand. I have not. I haven't even heard of it.
Yeah. So Helen's less on the actual recruiting side. So that would be, for Steve and myself. I have used Textio. It's an amazing tool. It's also expensive. So, so I've looked into that. A really great alternative tool that we use is, I'll send the link out, but it's a free online gender decoder where you just take like your job posting and you paste it in there. It's not incredibly like sophisticated. It basically has a list of words that it'll like find for you. It'll tell you if your job is masculine coded or feminine coded, and and so it kind of can help guide you there. And that one's free and it's useful. So we're happy to send that out. But it is based on real research, which is, it's also linked to the website, which you can read about.
That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Good questions.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Are there any, this was another question that came in beforehand, was, are there any other organizations that help with inclusive recruiting?
What, you don't want to work with us? Just kidding. So so there are companies. So I think, what you want to think about inclusive recruiting is, things like, how do we create inclusive job postings? How do we create a consistent interview process so that people are getting a consistent, we're measuring candidates by the same yardstick. How do we make sure our interview panels reflect the community that we're in and that, you know, the community we aspire to be. Things like that, where if you're exploring different recruiting models for your company, I think a lot of us think about, okay, well, let me work with an agency, you know, they'll send me resumes, it'll be good. But then there's a whole other piece to it that, you know, you really need some kind of HR talent partner to help with, who's experienced in this. And so, you know, that's exactly why we made our company is for that piece. You know, a lot of us come from the agency world and have realized there's more to hiring than just a resume, right? I can probably think of some others, but you know, generally you want to look to companies who are doing a combination of some kind of HR talent consulting and recruiting, and not just the recruiting and resume providing, if that makes sense.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I really appreciate all your wonderful information today. A lot of really very specific examples of things that are really helpful. And I want to launch a poll before we go. Don't leave yet. To fill out, please, for the audience. And while that's going, hopefully you can see it on your screen and you can answer the questions. I just want to give my thanks to RTA Consulting and Ruba and Helen and Steve, and then also to Christelle from the Portland State Business Accelerator for collaborating with us on this project. It's been really fun to pull it together and to try to come up with a topic that's relevant right now, especially right now. And Helen said, it sounds like it's here to stay.
Oh,
so
it is.
So this is the time to be talking about it. So we appreciate all your insight. And I will be sending out a link to the recording and to the slides. And probably we'll get that tomorrow in your email, and also LinkedIn profiles for our presenters today, and any other information that they want to provide, like that free tool for degenderizing the job description.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and we appreciate your support of the OBI and the Portland State Business Accelerator, and we hope you go forward and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you for having us, Renee and Christelle.
It's been wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.